So, my pranam to all of you. Good morning, afternoon, evening, good night, good whatever lila you are in, Ishanta lila, Purana lila, Purvana lila, Madhyan lila, whatever you may be located on planet Earth. And today we are continuing with our series of discussions connected to the Raga-vartma-candrika by Sri Vishwanath path, the moon ray which illuminates the path of sacred passionate love, Rag. So today we are in our 10th meeting already, and we are still discussing the 11th verse of the first part of Raga-vartma-candrika. Today we are in the 4th part of our study of this 11th verse, and I think we will have at least one more meeting, minimum. So let's make some brief recap of our previous discussion before entering into today's topic, which is a continuation of that. But in this 11th verse, as you may recall, Sri Vishwanath is explaining 3 important shlokas from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where Srila Rupa Goswami is discussing the main angas of Raga Nuga Bhakti. So we already have gone through the first one of these 3 verses of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and now we are on the second verse, which is explained by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. The second verse of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu about these angas of Bhakti says, Seva sadhaka rupena siddha rupena chatrahe tadbhava lipshuna karya braja lokana shatara. Basically it's saying that in this path of Raga Bhakti, one should serve both in the sadhaka deha and in the siddha deha, following in the wake of the Brajavasis, the Nitya Parishats, the Ragatmikas, desiring to have feelings similar to those of dear associate of Krishna, the ones of one's own choice. So that's Srila Rupa Goswami Pad's verse. So in his Raga-vartma-candrika, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elaborated on this. I will repeat briefly what I repeat in detail, the verse I shared with you in the chat. So basically there's Srila Rupa, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We have to go through the 6 Goswamis first, what to do. He explains about how we should serve in our sadhaka rupa, which refers to the present body, and the siddha rupa, which refers to our internally conceived meditational body that is suitable for eternal service, if we will, projection in that direction. The expression tat bhava lipshuna, which means desiring to attain their feelings, refers to following the footsteps of some of Krishna's eternal associates, according to one's own affinity, basically. And how the service is to be performed? Well, basically, he mentions Vishwanath with either items collected mentally or items collected with the physical body. We will continue elaborating on that. But externally, we may be doing service with body and senses, or we may engage as well in manasi seva. And regarding the mood to perform such service, Vishwanath explains Rupa's verse by quoting the phrase Braja Lokana Shatara, which means emulating the service attitude of the Brajavasis, which means Vishwanath mentions to serve according to Sri Rupa Goswami and other residents of Braj in the Sadhaka Deha, to follow their example as sadhakas, and to serve according to the model of Rupa Manjari and other residents of Braj in the Siddha Deha. So he very clearly established the main reference in our lineage in the context of Kamanuga Bhakti, who is Rupa Goswami or Rupa Manjari, but he also extends the possibility to other affinities by implying the idea of another residence of Braj. And he gives some examples at the end of different practitioners who followed this system, if you will, and attained their desired goal. He gives the example of Chandrakanti, other Sakis, the sages of Dandakaranya, the personified Shrutis, all of them, in order to attain their desired goal, they embrace the proper sadhana for that. That's the main point. The Bhagavatam mentions this when, for example, the personified Shrutis knew which was the necessary sadhana to attain the desired goal. They embraced that. The contrast of this is, for example, Lakshmi, who wanted to join Krishna Rasa Lila, but without embracing the proper Raga Nuga sadhana. So basically, this is what Vishwanath Chakravarti said there. So we explained this point. We should, as sadhakas, follow the Goswamis, their example, and their books, which are establishing the foundation for our practice, as well as nourishing the progressive Raga Nuga Sadhaka, which with details of intimate pastimes and narrations in the context more of Rasa Shastra and so on. But also we made it clear that if we want to immerse ourselves into the kingdom of inner world and Manasi Seva, there is some special adhikar required for that, especially if you want to enter into the details of the conjugal relationship between Radha and Krishna, which is called aprakrit. Aprakrit means it's not prakrit, it's not mundane, but it's also not adokshaya. Adokshaya means overtly transcendental. Aprakrit means it's transcendental, even beyond that, if you will, but it seems to be mundane. So if you don't have the proper sambandha gyan, the proper conceptual orientation to understand the nature of the love and exchange between Radha and Krishna, very easily we may project that to the worldly realm. What to speak, if you don't have the adhikar for that and you are really affected by mundane emotions, you may project that in the lila as well. So the best way to enter into the kingdom of this Manasi Seva, into the reality of the Siddha Deha we mentioned, for us, according to followers, we are followers of Bhaktivinoda Parivaris, full application of our Sadhaka Deha will give rise to our Siddha Deha. We have already spoken a little bit about that by speaking about Asakti and these advanced stages of sadhana. Today we will continue with this. So after mentioning some words of Sadhaka Deha, we enter into the details of Siddha Deha and trying to put that in context as well. So first of all, we mentioned in our previous class that the Goswami, for example, never used the expression Siddha Pranali, which is so popular nowadays, nor other acharya from other sampradayas like Nimbarka or Ballava, which are Raga Marga sampradayas. They do not receive, if you will, this information, but that's comes as an outcome of the practice. Regarding the Siddha Deha, we also mentioned these famous three padatis or manuals written by Gopal Guru Goswami, Dhyana Chandra Goswami, and Siddha Krishna Das Baba. And eventually the practice of Siddha Pranali got more systematized in three main elements that are bestowed in this moment of initiation, if you will, called Ikadasavav, or these 11 ingredients that conform the identity. Manjari Sadhana, the practice by one thinking of oneself as a Manjari. This is mainly connected to Manjari Bhav. Anastakaliya Lila Shmaran, meditating about the eightfold pastimes, eternal daily activities of Krishna. Of course, there is some form of that from day one, even for us. Naham Viprona Chanarapatir, these Bhuta Shuddhi mantras where we conceive ourselves. I try to identify, at least in a beginning, generic way, as a servant of Krishna, the lover of the gopis. But again, there are different approaches to this. We will continue today speaking about that. But also we quoted Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Jaiva Dharma. He speaks about two approaches to this: Bahir Panta and Antar Panta. The external path or the internal path. External means you are receiving that from outside, from the Guru, is revealing that and giving that information. And from inside, through the sadhana, that realization inside will come. So in both cases, it's being given. It's being given externally, or it's being given internally, because we are speaking in terms of bhakti, and bhakti is a gift from beginning to end. And also we spoke about the possibility of these two being complementary to one another. One may be practicing on advanced stages, we will speak about that today. We may complement with some details regarding this type of Manasi Seva and Lila Shmara and so on. So this is not something that Bhaktivinoda Thakur only said. Krishnadas Kaviraj also confirmed this in his commentary to the first verse of Krishna Karnamrita, speaking about these two paths. And also we mentioned how this Siddha Deha, this external bestowal came originally from Jagannath Puri, but eventually started to become established in Braj, especially in the Radhakunda area. But we closed our last meeting by emphasizing that this is an option, this is one approach, but not an absolute prerequisite, as some may think or may like to make others think. So that's a brief recap of our previous lecture. So today let's continue in this same line going into further detail about the real idea of what does it mean. Let's explain that. No? When Rupa Goswami is saying in this verse that we are explaining here, that this Panat is explaining here, Siva sadhaka rupena siddha rupena chatrahe. So here Sri Rupa uses the word siddha rupa, which will mean perfect form, basically, siddha rupa. So I think it's important to understand, it should be noted that this expression, siddha rupa, in this verse of Rupa, Sri Rupa, is not exactly referring to one's eternal spiritual body, but sometimes it's called siddha deha. This is a terminological thing, but it's important to make a distinction between this, and we will try to mainly elaborate on that today. When we speak about siddha, receiving a siddha rupa or practicing through a siddha rupa, we are speaking about a body that is developed by internal meditation under the direction of Sri Guru. And that's based on one's ideal in relationship with Krishna. Still, we are not speaking about a siddha deha proper. And when I say siddha deha proper, I mean a bhava deha. Because we already explained that at the stage of the Sakti, the last stage in sadhana, our spiritual identity starts to, we have a glimpse of that starting to bloom. And in Bhava Bhakti, we are engaging in a particular sadhana according to that identity, which is called Bhava Sadhana. We are beyond the stage of Sadhana Bhakti. We will be in Bhava Bhakti, but Bhava Bhakti has its own corresponding sadhana called Bhava Sadhana. When you are culturing in different ecstatic ingredients, different bhavas that will make eventually for the experience of rasa. The Sai Bhav, Anubhav, Vibhav, Sanchari Bhav, Sattvika Bhav. So Siddha Deha proper means Bhava Deha, a body made of Bhava, a body made of emotions. So if you are not in Bhava, you don't have a Siddha Deha. That's all basically, as you say, period. So if you receive, if you will, a so-called Siddha Deha before reaching Bhava, what's that Siddha Deha about? What's the constitution? What's the purpose? There is a possibility for that, but we should make a distinction between one and the other. Because if we have not achieved Bhav, that body has not yet descended to us. We already explained that. No? Our spiritual identity, first of all, is not inherent. And second, it's not like a suit, no? Like a coat hanging on a closet in Golok, waiting for us. And whenever we are ready, that appears. Yes, of course, our eternal identity is a divine descent from the Bhava Bhakti, from the Bhava platform, from the Prem platform, from the heart of the Nitya Parikars in Golok. So we could say our eternal Swarup is inherently present in the Swarup Shakti, but the Swarup Shakti is not, as we already explained, an abstract energy that is personified in the figure of the eternal associate of Krishna. So in their hearts, this Swarup Shakti is constantly creating new waves. It's, as Guru Maharaj will say, not only an eternal being, but an eternal becoming. So eventually, when we reach the stage of Bhava, we become fit ourselves to receive that particular wave that will descend from the Nitya Parikars that will constitute our Bhava Deha, our spiritual identity. Rupa Goswami mentions this when he defines sadhana bhakti. He says, Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasya Prakatyam Hridisadhyata. So sadhana has to do with arriving to Bhava, and Bhava is not something created by our sadhana. It's something that gets manifest as a descent, divine intervention by the grace of the Nitya Parikars. So my point is this: if we are not on Bhava, we don't have that Bhava Deha. So what we will receive is some other type of meditational body. So we will try to explain about that. I have been speaking recently with Advaita Das, which is a friend of mine, and he's part of Advaita Das from the Advaita Parivar, because there's one Advaita Das in the Gadadhar Parivar as well. And in the Advaita Parivar, generally, he was telling me they are not giving Siddha Pranali in Diksha. No? While the disciple may receive Diksha, it doesn't necessarily mean that it comes Siddha Pranali as well in the packaging. No? But they confer this to those who have proper eagerness, he was telling me. No? So when speaking to him, because it's interesting to get to know, because some people may say, okay, it's only us Bhakti Vinod Parivar who are not receiving this from day one, but it's not like that at all. He was telling me that this Siddha Deha is not coming, whatever I'm saying to you now, Siddha Deha is not coming, falling out from the sky, but must be formed gradually. From the point where one is pure enough to start meditating, by mental practice, that will be formed gradually. So we see it's a whole sadhana, and it's not that you already received that from the very beginning, in one sense. Narottam Das Tagore explains the same. He says meditation on the Siddha Deha is a sadhana. He says that in his Raga-vartma-candrika. No? We already quote that verse in the class. He's saying, whatever you think during your sadhana, you will attain in your Siddha body. Those are the ways of the Raga mark. So this is implying a sadhana, a practice where you are culturing this identity gradually. And we will continue explaining this now. So the Siddha Deha is not something coming out of the blue, as you say in English. But it has to be formed through constant meditation. Bhagavad Gita is confirming the same thing. Jam jam vapi shmaram bhavam tyayantyante kalevaram. Whatever your bhava you are thinking of in this life, that bhava you will attain at the end of your life. So that's a culture in this life, in the now. So in this connection, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the father of our Parivar, if you will, he's commenting on these points, very important points. He's mentioning that actually for the practitioner who has not achieved bhav or even not a sakti, maybe in lower stages, there is certain possibility of receiving this, but how does it happen in the practice? Well, the practitioner is idealizing some spiritual figure of himself or herself, projecting, have some prospect, I will like to be, I feel affinity in that direction. So the idea is that that person that is being idealized, projected, has to fit with the present feelings, emotions, and psychology of the sadhaka. Bhaktivinoda Thakur established this. And so compared to some other approaches to this Siddha Pranali conception, the way how Bhaktivinoda Thakur is accepting that is really considerably quite rational and sensitive according to our psychology and so on. So this Siddha Deha that Rupa Goswami is referring here in the verse, Vishwanath is explaining, actually is like, let's say, like a mental body that is being used for the practice of Raga Bhakti. It's a body that is conceived mentally, that is perfectly fitting with one's desired meditation. So again, this maybe won't happen from day one, but as one progresses, some necessity to fixing these details may be there. But still, there is some work in progress. So gradually we are meditating on something and we are fitting on that, and we are trying to engage, as we already mentioned before, not in kalpana, not in like unrestrained imagination, but disciplined imagination, if you will. I mean, we are imagining ourselves in that practice, and again, this is not a joke, but this is a serious practice, sadhana guided by Guru. You are imagining or conceiving the best version of yourself, if you will, according to your present affinity. But that you are thinking of, maybe you have not fully attained that, you are not in bhav or whatever, but you are thinking about that in certain parameters, in certain context. And that's why I say disciplined with disciplined imagination, not just thinking whatever I like in any context. So gradually, by that exercise, as we will see, accompanied by proper guidance and practice, eventually you become that thing that you were projecting. Nowadays, people speak in terms of neuroplasticity, which has to do with this, how your brain is transforming according to what you are thinking, you are projecting, you are willing, you become that basically. You alter your identity. So my point is that this Siddha Deha, this beginning, if you will, Siddha Deha, is not so much a mystical intervention from Sri Guru, where he's revealing who you are and giving you the Bhava Deha. Sometimes some practitioners are making of this much more of what it is. But actually this process is mainly a mutual discussion between Guru and disciple. Disciple will present her own affinity, inclination, and Guru will try to present some project, some idea that may fit with that, and And the disciple will say, yes, that fits with me. Or eventually after practice, the disciple may ask some adjustment to that or a whole new identity, who knows. So the point is, instead of giving a ultimate, if you will, final Siddha Deha or Baba Deha, which again cannot just be bestowed in that, but it will come as a result of applying ourselves in sadhana, what the Guru is giving at that moment, we could call it a working model, if you will. A working model. So this type of initiation, it's more like a prototype, a placebo, you see in English, placebo, like a prototype, placebo of more than a reality in itself, like some template, generic template with some varieties here and there, so it seems much more personalized, if you will. But it's not still our ultimate definitive ecstatic identity. That's a way of that may help us to conceive that gradually. Because basically that's what Raga Bhakti is about. Raga Bhakti has to do with a gradual, Guru Maharaj will call the Christians by transubstantiation of matter, he will say sometimes. So in this case, we'll speak about the gradual transmutation or transformation of our identity, of our sense of being. We are speaking here about altering, changing our sense of being to the point that we will only see ourselves in terms of Raganuga Seva, of a particular mode of service which has a corresponding identity, as we mentioned last class, this Buddha Suddhi mantra. We are denying many degrees, many layers of designations. I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not sannyasi, I'm not this. Of course, it's not just talking, but walking the talk. So gradually all this implies developing an abhiman. So abhiman means ego, not false ego, but real ego in this case, like a sense of identity of who I am. As Guru Maharaj will say, now we may feel I am American, I am a man, woman. In Brahman, you will feel I am, but we are after another type of I am. I am Gopa, I am Gopi. That's the abhiman. I am Dasa in Nityanamadu. So we are walking in that direction. Raga Bhakti implies we have to understand that because we are supposedly engaged in that. So our practice should progress in that line. Gradually, we should perceive our progress. Bhakti Parishanubhav Viraktir. We have to have certain symptoms of our progress in the way of I'm getting closer to my ultimate designation, closer and closer. I'm getting far more and far away from my so-called designation. I should eventually make all other designations disappear. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam. Tattarattvena nirmalam. That's one famous definition of bhakti. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam. To be free from all upadis, from all sense of self, false sense of self, all designation, totally, absolutely free. Vinirmuktam. Muktam means to be free of, from. Nirmuktam means to be considerably free from. And vinirmuktam means to be absolutely, extremely free from all sense of false designation except for I am a Gopa, Gopi, and so on. So that's the point. We are here to trying to follow the mood of the Nitya Parishat Singalok to a point that we have identified so much with that we stop, if you will, being who we are now or who we think we are. So we become that person that we really have the potential to be. Maybe we are not that yet, but we have a potential in certain direction in association with bhakti. So it's important that we understand this so we can also appreciate these elements of why Rupa Goswami speaks of the Siddha Rupa. What's the role of that at some stage in our practice of incorporating this element? That has to do with the sense of transforming our identity in Raga Bhakti. So this type of identification, now we can give many examples to this in the scripture and from even secular sections, no? How to absorb our sense of self in a role model to follow or in our desired identity we want to attain. And there's a famous theater director, acting director called Konstantin Stanislavski. Maybe you have heard about him, but he has a very interesting techniques of acting, contemporary acting. So he developed some techniques where the actor really enters into the character, if you will. So in the beginning, the actors will merely copying, the character they are trying to become. But eventually the goal, the success of the actor, of the practitioner, will be to become fully, but so much fully identified with, in this case, in our case, with a particular character in Raja Lila. And in this case, I'm not referring to our role model to follow, but to the personality we want to be there. Eventually, all this will be happening. So, because if not, we will engaging in a hunger passion, as I say. We don't want to become Rupa Manjari. We want to become someone in service of, if you will, there. So at one point, we will become so much identified with that person actually becomes that person. We become that person. At some point in our practice, we will start to feel an inclination. And again, in the context of receiving this particular type of approach and guidance, those elements may be there. Guru may share some information. It's not obligatory, it's not mandatory, as I say, but if that happens, this is the way it should happen, ideally, to be realistic and sustainable. So in other words, in this type of approach, you will meditate in yourself as serving a specific person in the lila, and eventually you will adopt the identity of such servant in the lila in due course of time. Gradually, it works like that according to this system. Slightly different, but in the line of what we are speaking here about, transforming our identity. Srila Rupa Goswami also speaks about an interesting concept called Sadharani Karana in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the second part of the book, 5th chapter. He quotes Sadharani Karana. So he defines Sadharani Karana. He's saying that he's speaking in context of rasa here. So he said this rasa experience is very difficult to understand due to its transcendent nature. In it, all the bhavas manifest spontaneously through the process of identification. The process of identification in which the audience, in this case the devotee, loses the sense of the distinction between self and the other, namely the characters in the literary production, in this case Radha and Krishna, because all this is spoken in the context of drama, rasa and so on. This is called the commonality of emotions, called generally Sadharani Karana by previous authorities. So of course Rupa Goswami is referring here to other previous works like Sahitya Darpana and the Rasa Shastras of Bharat and so on, which explain emotions and rasas in the context of theatrical performance and so on. And Rupa Goswami is taking all that in the context of Bhakti Rasa. So he mentions Sadharani Karana means this commonality of emotion. When you really identify, absorb in one direction, that you become eventually that emotion, if you will. You eventually personify that. So some ideas regarding what's implied in the idea of altering our identity and how this may happen in the context of this idea of Siddhadeha. So let's continue with our Parivar stance, if you will, and not only our Parivar, but as we had mentioned, Mahaprabhu's, Goswami's, and Bhagavat's stance. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Harinam Chintamani, he emphasizes that as one is advancing in chanting, remember we mentioned this important point that through chanting all will be revealed, through proper application of Sadhaka Deha, Siddha Deha will emerge and so on. So as one is advancing in the chanting of Srinam, one should simultaneously, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions, engage in Smaran on the form, qualities, and Leela of Krishna in this order, as we mentioned, Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela, as you are chanting and as you are progressing in your practice. And this particular form, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions, in which Krishna appears in meditation, again, he's appearing in meditation, is replete with specific qualities that correspond with the worshipper's budding sentiment. So here Thakur is speaking about the budding sentiment. So again, we can speak in terms of asakti here. No? Your identity is budding, but also we will see this can also be applied to some previous stages of sadhana like ruchi and even nishta. So after explaining this, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions that meditation on the Leela of Sri Krishna Leela is to be performed from the perspectives of one's Siddha Rupa. So what we are speaking here. So it's not just thinking what's going on there, but trying to really enter there through proper meditation. So in support, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in support of the practice of meditating on one Siddha Rupa and the Astakaliya Lila, as we mentioned, the Nitya Lila of Krishna, Bhaktivinoda is quoting as support the Ramananda Sambad, Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Roy Ramananda, who is the Raga Marga Guru of Mahaprabhu, he's explaining to him some truth concerning Siddha Deha. There is some verse there we'll quote in some minutes. So it's interesting because Ramananda is speaking to Mahaprabhu, but Mahaprabhu is receiving, if you will, being in school and instructed in this after taking sannyas and after engaging in Krishna Sankirtan for some time already. Not from day one, that's my point. So at this point in Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes that in order to begin this bhajan of meditating on the daily lila of Krishna and one Siddha Rup, because one thing goes in hand with the other, in order for meditating that lila, you will do it from a particular identity you yourself are conceiving. But Bhaktivinoda say first, before entering here, you first have to hear the things in theory from one's guru. And he mentions 5 stages in this connection. First of all is Shravan Das, Shravan, hearing. So he translates this as hearing with eagerness and with a desire to serve in the lila. But this is a real eagerness and real desire. And it's not just like whimsical wish, if you will, no? Wishful thinking, but a real eagerness and a desire to serve in that direction. So Shravan Das, you will hear with that passion, if you will. Then, after such a hearing from Sri Guru about the theoretical details of this, comes Bharana Das. Bharana means acceptance. So this involves the disciple accepting his hearing and the disciple is expressing her experience of his emergent spiritual identity on some level or another, some affinity. She is expressing that to Sri Guru, how he is reacting to what the Guru is saying, and in response to that, the Guru will confirm and further clarify such an identity, adjusting details between the two, as we already mentioned, work in progress. And when the disciple embraces the identity, if you will, he or she will begin the third practice, will be Smaran proper, which it's Smaran in the concept of this from the perspective of the Siddha Rupa on the daily lila of Krishna, Astakaliya lila. And this third stage of Smaran involves, I already mentioned this in previous classes, 5 stages at the same time. Remembrance, Smaran, Dharana, which means like self-reminding, let's say, or concentration. Then Dhyan, which can be called meditation, or absorption in one's object of meditation. Anusmriti, or Dhruva Anusmriti sometimes, uninterrupted meditation, and Samadhi, which will be like, let's say, accomplished, comprehensive meditation. So after the third stage, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions 2 more stages, which are later stages. Bhavappana Das, we already went to Shravana, Bharana, and Smaran. Now Baba Appana Das, which is the stage of application, which means that in maturity, this stage receives the name, another name of this is Swarup Siddhi, basically. As I mentioned before, Vishuddha Sattva, Swarup Shakti is descending upon the heart, and Bhava, Rati, manifests in the devotee. So we are speaking about already a Bhava stage. Before these ingredients like Ikada Sabab, these ingredients, this information will be practiced by one's own efforts and by the grace of some advanced Vaishnava. But after some time, when we enter into these stages, Bhava, these transcendental emotions coming from that parikar descending again, Vishuddha Sattva descending from the heart of someone's heart in Golok, will manifest automatically. You won't be able to stop that. And finally, the fifth stage is Prema Sampati Das, which has to do with the manifestation of Prem, the refinement of that Prem, and eventually one enters the Vastu Siddhi, which is the concrete, the ultimate perfection in the Golok. So we won't enter into further detail there. But my point is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is quoting all these stages. So these 5 dasas, the 5 of them are called dasas, are stages, and all of them are kram, as we already explained. Kram means sequence, gradual progression, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So when the sadhaka has advanced through all these 5 levels, at that point we of course will say she will attain qualification to fully remember Krishna Lila uninterruptedly. No? At that time, his absorption, his remembrance will be automatic. It's we call swarasiki, which will spontaneous flow without any effort from her part. Even if at that stage the devotee wants to check his absorption, she will be unable to do that. So as a conclusion of this section, what appears from this text that is to Harinam Chintamani of Bhaktivinoda Thakur is that the emergence of one's Siddha Deha proper occurs at a later stage of devotion. And if we speak about Siddha Deha from beginning stages, we are speaking about something else, if you will. Actually, indeed, the entire discussion that Bhaktivinoda Thakur presents in his Harinam Chintamani about this topic is in the final section of the final chapter of the book. And interestingly, because the greater balance of the book consists of a description of offenseless chanting without aparad of Krishna Nam. So everything is put in proper context. But of course, the point is that whenever one Siddha Deha begins to manifest, and we know that won't happen from day one, whenever Siddha Deha begins to manifest, to that extent, of course, one should try to meditate on it. Again, it's not a sin, it's not forbidden, it's part of the practice. But again, there are ways and stages and approaches to all this. So on one side, I wanted to speak about this today, presenting a general idea of how Siddha Deha appears and what's this Siddha Rupa that Rupa Goswami is speaking. But also I would like to contrast that with the conception of receiving Siddha Deha from day one and considering that an absolute divine revelation and that's all and no need for further adjustment, and entering into a really dangerous, I will say even, lands. So sometimes this bestowal of Siddha Deha, of this identity from very early beginning, neophyte even stages of practice, find its just justification from the definition of Diksha. I think I mentioned this before, that we find in the Agamas that Jiva Goswami quotes in his Bhakti Sandarbha, Divya Gyan, and so on. Their Diksha is defined as the process of bestowing Divya Gyan. So Divya Gyan means divine knowledge, divine wisdom. And interestingly, the Divya Gyan, the concept, the definition of Divya Gyan is even further expanded with a reference to Padma Purana there in Bhakti Sandarbha is 283 Anucheda. So the reference to Bhakti Sandarbha says Divya Gyan refers to awareness of the Lord's constitutional identity and one's specific relation with the Lord transmitted through a mantra. So of course, we can make a lot from this definition when we can take different stances, more conservative, more liberal, and so on. So we have this. So it's important to know how to deal with this in a sustainable way. So the point is that initiation, of course, certainly that initiation into the Diksha mantras of a particular Vaishnava lineage gives one the form of God to be worshipped. From day one, we receive our Istadev, if you will, in that line, and the potentiality to awaken that specific relationship. I mean, that's there from day one in some level. In our case, which is that form of God to be worshipped, Rajendra Nandan Sri Krishna. Aradhyo Bhagavam Brajesatanayas Tadham Vrindavanam. Famous verse. Aradhyo Bhagavan, our worshipable Bhagavan in our particular Sampradaya. Braja is Satanaya, it's the son of the king of Braj. in Vrindavan. But the point is, and of course, there is a particular type of relationship with Krishna and Braj in a general sense, maybe, and the main current we know which is it, and we have some other options. So all that is given from day one in a general way. But that cannot mean that revelation of one's spiritual identity will be there before one has the legitimate, again, eagerness to appreciate it. What to speak of having reached Bhava Bhakti? I mean, if you don't have proper eagerness, proper lobha, we have been speaking about this. We have already in quoted Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu before. Rupa Goswami mentioning intense eagerness is a prerequisite for entering the path of Raga Bhakti. So on some level or another. So if you don't have such extreme eagerness, what will you do with your so-called ultimate spiritual identity? So there has to be some adhikar proportionate to that revelation. And as we mentioned also before in our previous lectures here in the Raga-vartma-candrika, our relationship with Krishna, which results from an ingress of bhakti in our lives, naturally arises through sadhana, in the form of sambandha gyan, the knowledge concerning the nature of the relationship, the form we will serve, the mood, the psychology for that. This knowledge that is required for Raganuga sadhana proper also can be revealed. Raga-vartma-candrika said that in 9th verse, 2 verses back, please remember, he mentioned, the required knowledge for engaging a Raganuga sadhana, all this detailed information can be revealed in different ways. He gives 3 options. He said it can be given by one's Diksha Guru, which is some external information to be realized internally. It can be given by one's Siksha Guru, which again is external information to be realized internally, or it can be realized through sadhana internally. It will be given, if you will, by sadhana internally, which is inner insight. So my point is, yes, you can receive that by someone, but that can come also from inside. So there is no need, if you will, to be concerned, I have to adopt some new practice with the idea of if I do not do that, what will happen? I will miss the entirety of Raja Leela. No necessity of hurrying up, being in a hurry. I'm trying to figure out what will be my relationship with Krishna. Now let's understand that have increased our faith in practice and in Srinam and how all this will come by revelation in one of the 3 ways mentioned above, by the practice of, by the grace of Sri Guru, Diksha Siksha. So, so we have this definition of Diksha by Driva Goswami, the one I mentioned before, Bhakti Sandarbha, about the bestowal of divine knowledge. But we have some other quotes in scripture, let's be fair with that, which speak about Siddha Deha on some way or another in the context that we are speaking now. For example, in Bhakti Sandarbha 286, Jiva Goswami is saying that Bhuta Suddhi means of purification of one's existence, means that one meditates on one's own desired Siddha Deha, which is fit for serving the Lord. Fit for serving the Lord. Krishna Das Kaviraj also says in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Madhya Lila, chapter 22, think of your own desired Siddha Deha as a sadhana. So again, we see that's there. We are not trying to demonize all this. Also, Krishna Das Kaviraj in his Tika to Krishna Karnamrita, he says, Tika to verse 3, on the Raganuga path, even a sadhaka who has no rati means bhava, yet can think of his own desire Siddha Deha, which again, this doesn't mean, okay, he has no bhava, we can go down till anartha nibriti. No. So we are trying to establish some middle point in all this. But the point is the practice is authentic, but it's authentic in certain parameters. For example, I read recently from someone who shared some testimony from a reliable source that he had at Radhakund. And he said that someone at Radhakund told him that 50 years ago, the standard for giving a Kada Sabab, this Siddha Pranali, in Radhakund, which is the embassy of that nowadays, the standard for receiving that was chanting 3,100 names daily, 3 lakhs, 192 rounds per day, basically, for at least 1 year. And it is said that that was a meditation generally given after Babaji initiation for most of the people. So there was some conservative stance as well. It was not just given like water to everyone and anyone. So the point is, we are not condemning the fact that this Siddhadeha may be revealed, may be given in certain circumstances, in certain contexts and parameters. But what we do criticize, if you will, is to give this to Kanishta Bhaktas, to impose, if you will, the Kada Sabha to people who doesn't have yet the qualification to know what to do with that, to deal with that. So let me share, I don't know, some reasons for that. For example, I remember some cases that show you what happens when you are given such an esoteric content to people who really do not have the maturity to deal with that. First of all, what we already said, the guru, if the devotee is neophyte, is not a bhava bhakta, it's not an asakti sadhaka or whatever, guru won't be able to know the specific identity of his disciple till the own ruchi of the disciple, of the student, started to come, to bloom by the strength of Vaishnava Seva, of his Nam Bhajan, by the strength of her own practice. That will start to bloom, and the guru can have an idea and guide the disciple in that. But before that, it's not that the guru is meditating and mystically already knowing which is your spiritual identity, and you are Kanishta Bhakti in the stage of Shraddha, Sadhu Sangam, Bhajana. There's no way to do that. I heard some examples also, which are funny, but also are tragic, if you will. For example, some years ago, some devotees became like God siblings, God brothers in Radhakunda. The two of them received Siddha Pranali there. So at some point, they started to share between themselves their so-called secret details of their Siddha Pranali Diksha, their Kanishta Siddha Pranali Diksha. And eventually they discovered that both of them had the exactly same Swarup, with exactly the same Ekadasha Bhavs. The 11 ingredients were exactly the same. So they were the same person in every single sense of the word. So again, that's not very much befitting. Or some other situation, one devotee went receive initiation in Radhakund, but he was curious, let's say, that's the only word comes to my mind, and he went to other place to receive another Siddha Pranali from another guru. And he was surprised because the two different gurus gave him totally different identities. So again, that shows you have not that identity yet. And different people is giving you different things. So who are the ones giving that? Who are the ones receiving that? It is not to make of something so sacred a cheap bargaining and exchange and business even. There was some other case of one lady, this devotee, she received Siddha Pranali, but eventually she left the Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion, for some years by certain circumstances. But some years after that, she wanted to recover her practice. But she had lost her Diksha Patra, this like certificate where all these ingredients, elements of her identity were there. So she was not able to fully remember who she was, if you will. She only had some idea. So she went to her guru, and she asked him, can you give me the information again? But the point is that the guru gave you totally different information. She knew something, she remembered something, to the point of realizing this is totally different. And which was the result of that? Confusion and loss of faith. So the point again, this is to take care, because if a Kanishta Bhakta is receiving this, that won't be healthy. That will be damaging. It will be open some sort of Pandora box, if you will, of misunderstandings, and the practitioner will conduct her own sadhana in a really distorted way, which won't be fitting to her own level of realization. And this is, many Babajis and Goswamis nowadays accept this till now. If you speak with Babajis and Goswamis, both in Vrindavan and in Puri, which, for example, those who descend from the lines of the six Goswamis, Gadadhar Pandit, Krishnadas, Kaviraj, and some others, all of them accept this point. You cannot share these things to anyone, to a neophyte especially. So in this way, we see, this instruction of Siddha Pranali or Manasi Seva can be abused and has been abused and is still being abused. It has been even observed by, I don't know, by some so-called gurus that, with all respect, of course they're bona fide people, but again, there are many others that are more interested in filling their pockets and bellies by attracting disciples with the carrot, if you will. Of, you can receive Siddha Deha here to people who actually are not capable of dealing with that, and those gurus are not capable of revealing the eternal service of the disciple, because none of them are fully with the proper adhikar for that. So even today, as we mentioned, you can go from one guru to the next. In certain places, you'll receive many so-called Siddha Dehas, which one will be different from the other and one from the other, and regardless of what stage of spiritual advancement you may have attained. So again, we don't want to make Mahaprabhu's gift a joke, no? Such a cheap thing. So the idea is, just to close and leave some minutes for questions in case you have, but to caution against this. Our Bhaktivinoda Parivar, our lineage, again, it's not against this. It's trying to present that in a particular context, but it's not stressing this kind of Manasi Seva in any detail before one is entering certain level of advancement. And when this, I don't mean bhava necessarily, nor even a sakti, but at least before one enters into advanced stages of nishtha, let's say. And more so, of course, with stages like ruchi and asakti. Before that, you have to concentrate on Chetadarpana Marjanam, cleansing your heart, cleansing your mind from the dust of material samskars, with the intention of eventually entering into the other deeper levels of meditation. So that's the point. In our parivar, those details won't be stressed till, again, advanced stage of nishtha, ruchi, asakti. These three stages, nishtha, ruchi, asakti, are the final stages of sadhana bhakti. Before Shraddha, Sadhusanga, Bhadana, Kriya, and Artha Nivriti. In these three final stages, nishtha, ruchi, asakti, one's mind will be controlled. In some way or another, on some level or another, it will be controlled. First by intellect and sustained spiritual practice, which is nishtha. Nishtha has to do with that, as you know, harmonizing head and heart. With intellect and steady practice, your mind is under control. Kirtaniya sadahari. And after nishtha, mind will be also controlled, but through other levels of insight, by softened spiritual heart, ruchi, and spiritual attachment, asakti. So different levels of controlling of our mind that will allow our controlled mind to really engage into this esoteric absorption practice. And in our particular lineage, furthermore, rather than learned, if you will, Manasi Seva, we stress natural Manasi Seva, if you will, which arises out of bhajan, out of proper kirtan, proper engagement. And for this, I would like to finish quoting Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who must always quotes his line, Kirtana prabhave, shmarana svabhave, Sri Kali bhajana nirjana sambhava. So Kirtana prabhave, shmarana svabhave. Shmarana, or meditations in one's own Siddha Deha, let's put it in that context here, meditations of one's Sarup, Shmaran, Kirtana prabhave. That will arise out of Kirtan, of proper embracing Kirtan. And Srikali Bhajana Nirjana Sambhava. And at that time, one can sit in solitary bhajan. This is what Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta mentions in Vaishnava Ke, his famous poem regarding who is a Vaishnava. If you want to enter into Nirjan, solid bhajan, solitary bhajan, and absorb yourself, okay, engage properly in Kirtan, and that will beget a particular type of Shmaran. So this is the main stance of our Bhaktivinoda Parivar, which has been particularly interestingly presented according to time, place, and circumstance, also by Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta during his time. So next class, our next meeting, we will elaborate on Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta's stance in detail about this. and how to take that and apply that in our particular present situation, and as well present times in the world and in the Gaudiya Vaishnava community. So I will finish here. So thank you very much for your time. And before finishing, of course, I don't know if you have any questions. We may spend some time in that.
Dandavat Maharaj.
Jai, Prabhupada, I was waiting for you. I was concerned.
Thank you very much for this class.
No, thank you.
I never really understood this this verse, that what this Siddha Deha means before your class. So I'm very thankful for this. Because it seems so strange. How can you do sadhana with a Siddha Deha? If you have a Siddha Deha, then you should already be a Siddha. You don't need to do sadhana. So this makes so much sense. But I have a question about these different stages. Like we often hear about the different stages of Rupa Goswami, Shraddha, Sadhusanga, so on. And you were mentioning that this kind of Manasi Seva begins earliest at the later stages of Nishtha. And this system of these stages, we often hear about it, but it seems that we don't really use it in practical terms. I don't know anybody, like which stage is Padmanabh Maharaj on, which stage is Dulal Chandra on, which stage is Brigupada on. I have no idea. And I've also never heard Guru Maharaj or anybody else say that Saragrahi, she's on this stage, so she should do like that. So it seems that we have this great tool, but somehow it's not being used.
Well, I have heard Guru Maharaj expressing in those terms. Of course, not in a public forum, but in certain intimate interactions, speaking about some devotees, speaking about oneself, and trying to make sense of what one as a practitioner may be going through inside, which are the experiences inside, the necessities, because there are symptoms, as you know, if you go through for example, Madhurya Kadambini, every single state, that's a very valuable book in the sense that in so many senses, but it gives him up in the sense of showing which is the attributes of each specific step of the ladder, each chapter of the book. So you can really look at yourself and realize, I am standing there, I'm standing there, because it's important to know where we are standing, at least on some level. It's not that we will be walking and judging everyone. Oh, you are like this, you are a Kanishta, you are a Nishtita, you are a Ruchiva. But in some level, it is important to know that, because we need to check our progress. It's important that in time we pay attention, where are we standing, because if not, we may just not be making any progress. So there are symptoms about the different stages. Of course, this is not to maybe speak publicly and make a whole event of that, but in certain confidence, one can speak with one's own Diksha, Siksha gurus and share, well, I'm having this affinity, I'm feeling this attraction or this lack of attraction. So many things can happen simultaneously even. And on that way, you with the help of some advanced Vaishnava, you start to figure out where you are standing in all these stages that Rupa Goswami is describing. And of course, each stage has sub-stages, if you will, as we mentioned, advanced Nista. It's not that yesterday I was in Nista and tomorrow I'm in Ruchi. It's a very gradual transition. So I think that's important. Again, maybe we don't hear about that too much because not something for public consumption, that we will be like putting a label of everyone. You are this, you are here. And I agree that many devotees may not know where they are standing, or may not know where others are standing. It's okay, and they should not rush into trying to get there. But it's important eventually to know, especially starting from our own self, No? And of course, if you perceive I'm advancing, Guru Maharaj many times told me this. I look at myself and I feel, oh, this insight is coming, this advancing is coming, but it's not me. I mean, I won't be proud from that, but it's a gift from Bhakti. But I acknowledge that. And that helps me to realize where I'm standing and what's the necessity of this particular stage and how to nourish my practice. And in this way, one can, again, guhyam akyati prichati, one can reveal one's mind with the Vaishnava and sharing confidence and receive certain specific, let's say, again, it may not begin with a systematic, okay, now sit and engage in manasi seva and you are that person and think in this lila. But you may say, let's say to the Guru, oh Guru Maharaj, after such and such years of practice and such association and such mercy, I'm feeling certain affinity in this direction. So what do you think? It's okay, it's not? And maybe Guru will test you. No, Guru Maharaj will say that when he visited, for example, Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaj, Guru Maharaj shares this idea, no? And he shared to him that he had some affinity to Sakya Bhav. And Guru Maharaj tells, and Narayana Maharaj started to test me to see if my attraction was bona fide or not. So he wanted to know if I had proper tattva and siddhanta to sustain my attraction. And when he realized that I had that, he stopped trying to test me. You know? So Guru may put some filters, but eventually will recommend, read this section, recite these shlokas, meditate daily on these ashtakams, pray in this direction. So eventually something more specific will be coming to our sadhana. In the context of our chanting and our daily normal practices, some more detailed ingredients may come as we are feeling some affinity. So it's important to share that. And of course, again, to be open to realize if that's really genuine or if maybe we are put to test and we realize, oh, it was not something too deep, actually. That can happen as well. But it's there. Maybe it's not so overtly, like recommended and do this and do that, but all the, as you say, valuable tools, if you will, are there, and we should take advantage of that in a sober way at the same time. No? So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So any other question? Okay. Rigopal has a second one?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Yes.
You mentioned that this Siddha Deha is a little bit like a prototype. I think you used that name, that word.
Yeah, prototype, placebo, work in progress, whatever.
Yeah. So if we think of it like that, what actually is the problem then with two persons having, for example, like you gave this example, two persons having exactly the same prototype?
Yeah. The problem is that they did not receive that as a prototype. No, as I mentioned, generally in these particular circles, if you will, they are not being told that this is a prototype, but they are being, with all respect, sometimes sold. They sell the product. They say, Srila Gurudev enters in trance and he is like channeling the information from the Golok, and this is what you will be eternally. So the disciple is kind of receiving that in that context. He's not aware of this is a prototype, this is a work model in progress. We have to fit details in time. That idea is not there. So they are just in their immature faith thinking, oh, that's my eternal spiritual identity. And in that sense, it's a problem. We find other one and say, oh, I'm the same person. It sounds like more like Mayavad or something. We became one or something. So the problem is that in that sense. No? In what you said, it's okay. Yeah, if it's a work in progress in the beginning, it may be some generic idea that may be similar or even identical in two cases, but eventually both we will end up being two different people. But if you receive such orientation and from the very beginning you say, no, Sri Guru is just receiving the information directly from Golok and this, you are this. So that will create a problem. So that will be the subtle difference. Thanks for clarifying the point. Thank you. Okay. Any other question? Okay, so I think we will finish here today. Thank you very much for your time, and next week we will continue with this verse, still one more lecture, so bear with me. I think it's important and necessary to enter into the details of these topics, and then we will continue with further sections of the Raga-vartma-candrika. So, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Raga-vartma-candrika ki jai, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakurpad ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Bol. वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पवनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनन्तकोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। गो हरि बोल।